Tonight, I want to tell you one of those stories from Chinese history that almost sounds too strange to be real. A teenage boy begging for food with a broken bowl in his hands later became emperor. Not a prince cast out into the world, not a general who simply replaced one dynasty with another. When this story begins, his family is poor, famine has hit, relatives are dying one after another, and he has to beg other people for a patch of land just to bury the dead. And yet, only a few decades later, he would become emperor and rule tens of millions of people across China. It sounds like legend, but it's true. Every step he takes from rock bottom to the very top runs through war, famine, and death. And the hardest part of this story is not even that. You might think this is just a poor boy's rise to power. But after he sits on the throne, some of the things he does are harsher than the struggle that kept him alive in the first half of his life. The men who help him win the empire do not all end well, and when corrupt officials fall into his hands, they usually do not walk away clean either. But on the other hand, he really does cut taxes, reclaim wasteland, repair waterworks, and support widows, orphans, and the elderly poor. So if you say he never wanted ordinary people to live a stable life, that is not right either. That is why you cannot look at just one side of him. To understand him, you have to go back to the worst moment of his life. In Fengyang, in what is now Anhui province in eastern China, there lived a 16-year-old boy named Zhu Yuanzhang. And before anything else, it is worth looking at that name. Why is he called Zhu Yuanzhang? Taken literally, Yuanzhang means double eight. On the surface, it sounds like nothing more than a name based on a number, but behind it is not some harmless naming habit. It reflects the way poor Han Chinese at the bottom of Yuan rule were looked down on and forced to live under pressure. The Yuan dynasty was founded by the Mongols. Society under the Yuan had a rigid hierarchy. Mongols and other privileged groups stood at the top. Han Chinese and so-called Southerners were pushed below them. Zhu Yuanzhang belonged to that Southerner category, almost the lowest rung in the order. In a world like that, many poor Han Chinese did not even have proper given names. They were often named by adding their parents' ages together, or simply by birth order. Names like Zhu Wuxi and Zhu Yuanzhang came from that sort of practice. So this is not just a casual name. It is a sign that even the most basic dignity of being a person has been taken away. Behind the name Zhu Yuanzhang stands the crushing weight of Yuan rule on poor Han Chinese and the humiliation of a man who does not even get to choose his own name. And at that point, Zhu Yuanzhang is still just a teenager begging to stay alive. If you could walk up to him then and say, "Hey kid, 24 years from now you're going to sit on the dragon throne and rule tens of millions of people," he would probably think you'd gone delirious from hunger. Because at that moment, his life has already hit bottom. His father is dead. His mother is dead. His older brother is dead. His little brother is dead. Out of a family of 6, only he and his second brother are still alive. That is where Zhu Yuanzhang starts. He does not just lose his family. He cannot even find a piece of ground to bury his parents. To get them buried, he has to go from house to house, begging someone to spare a patch of wasteland. That humiliation and helplessness stay with him for the rest of his life. At this point, almost nothing is left in his hands, just one bowl and one life. But 24 years later, he is sitting on the dragon throne. From beggar to emperor. It sounds like fiction. It is not. It is real history. So tonight, let's figure out how it happened. And more importantly, what made it possible in the first place. Now let's go back to the beginning. In 1344, Zhu Yuanzhang is 16 years old. That year, 2 things happen, and together they change everything. The first is that the Yellow River floods. The Yellow River is often called China's Mother River, the cradle of Chinese civilization. When it breaks its banks, whole stretches of farmland and villages can go down with it. Fields are destroyed, villages are submerged, hundreds of thousands are left homeless. The second thing comes right behind the flood, exactly the way disaster often does, plague. And once it spreads, Fengyang, Zhu Yuanzhang's hometown, becomes a place where death seems to be everywhere. Chronicle of Ming events records it with brutal simplicity. A great plague struck Huainan. His parents, elder brother and younger brother, all died. In barely half a month, his parents, his elder brother, and his little brother die one after another. Only Zhu Yuanzhang and his second brother are left. Later, that second brother also flees to look for food, and the two brothers are separated from then on. What remains is a broken thatched hut. They cannot even afford coffins. Zhu Yuanzhang and his brother carry their relatives' bodies and kneel from house to house, begging for a place to bury their parents. When the landlords refuse them land, it almost means that even the dignity of burying his parents has been denied him. He kneels again and again, and still cannot get a piece of ground. In the end, a neighbor named Liu Jizu gives them a patch of wasteland, no coffin, only a straw mat, no burial clothes, only the rags the dead are wearing when they die. Years later, Zhu Yuanzhang remembers it in the imperial mausoleum stele like this. There was no coffin. The bodies were wrapped in poor clothing. They were covered with barely 3 feet of earth, and there was nothing proper to offer in mourning. This is very likely one of the most humiliating and most unforgettable memories of his entire life. Did he clench his fists at that moment? The histories do not say. What is clear is that the feeling of having no way out never really leaves him. At that moment, Zhu Yuanzhang can hardly imagine that decades later, as emperor, he will build an imposing imperial mausoleum for those same parents. Right now, he cannot even secure a place to bury them. After burying his parents, Zhu Yuanzhang makes a decision. He becomes a monk, not because of some sudden burst of religious faith, simply because a monastery might at least feed him. He goes to Huangjue Monastery in Fengyang, shaves his head, and puts on a monk's robe. But he is not a fully ordained monk. He is a novice doing chores around the temple, sweeping floors, lighting incense, striking the bell, cooking. Nearly all the temple's humblest chores fall to him. At the time, it probably seems like the only way left to stay alive. Nothing more than becoming an anonymous little monk and staying alive a little longer. But that path does not last long either. According to the imperial mausoleum stele, only 50 days later, the monastery itself runs out of grain. The abbot tells them to go out, beg for food, and come back only after finding something to eat. In practice, that means begging. At 16, Zhu Yuanzhang picks up that broken bowl again. This time, he is not just begging around Fengyang. He is going to wander across Huaishi, the region around the modern Anhui Henan borderlands in east-central China, and he will be gone for 3 full years. From Fengyang, he goes south to Hefei in modern Anhui, west to Xinyang and Gushi in modern Henan, north to Ruzhou and Chenzhou, also in today's Henan, east to Luyi and Bozhou around the Anhui Henan border. For 3 full years, he walks the whole Huaishi region. The sources do not record the exact distance, but judging from the route, he likely walks well over 1,000 kilometers. And what he sees along the way is famine, death, refugees, and collapse. For a young man, this is not some abstract age of chaos. It is a reality that can swallow you whole any day. Years later, he recalls that period in the imperial mausoleum stele like this. Everyone looked after themselves, drifting like clouds in water. In plain terms, people were scattered, each trying to survive alone. Hardly anyone is going to stop and help him. In the end, the only person he can really rely on seems to be himself. Those 3 years leave a deep mark on him. After he becomes emperor and looks back on that life, he leaves another line. I looked up into the vast sky, numb like a wooden puppet. In plain terms, he felt like a wooden puppet, staring numbly at the world. And those 3 years never really stop following him. If you keep watching how he judges people and how he sees the world later in life, you can still see that shadow there. 3 years later, Zhu Yuanzhang returns to Huangjue Monastery. Back at the temple, he probably thinks life might finally settle down for a while. Maybe this is where he will spend the rest of his days. But that calm does not last long. A few more years pass, and the world outside grows even more chaotic. Yuan control keeps weakening. Uprisings break out one after another. Zhu Chongba remains at the monastery, watching the world outside slide further into chaos. Then one day, he receives a letter. It is from Tang He, a childhood friend. Tang He tells him that he has joined the Red Turbans and now commands roughly 1,000 men, and asks whether Zhu Chongba wants to come. The Red Turbans are one of the biggest anti-Yuan rebel movements of the time. Their early leaders are Han Shantong and Liu Futong. Han Shantong proclaims himself the Ming king, a messianic figure said to be the reborn Maitreya Buddha sent to save the people. After his death, his son Han Liner inherits that position. They wear red cloth on their heads. That is why people call them the Red Turbans, and their slogan spreads across the land. The Ming king has appeared to save the people. At this point, Zhu Chongba seems to have only two choices: go and maybe die on a battlefield, stay and maybe spend the rest of his life as a monk. He cannot decide, so he turns to the Buddha. He draws lots before a Buddha statue. The first answer is go. The second answer is also go. Was he really asking the Buddha, or just trying to find the courage to make the leap? The sources do not say. It feels more like the sort of thing a man does when he reaches a crossroads and wants some reason, any reason, to start moving. So at 25, Zhu Chongba makes the decision that changes his life. He leaves Huangjue Monastery and heads for Haozhou, near present-day Fengyang in Anhui. But what is waiting for him there is not stability. It is an attempt to join the rebels that nearly gets him killed. When Zhu Chongba reaches Haozhou, the city gates are shut. He explains why he is there. He wants to join the Red Turbans. The soldiers on the wall look him up and down, a ragged monk's robe, a shaved head. In a time like that, with war everywhere, the first instinct of men guarding a city is simple: seize him first. Haozhou has only just been taken by the Red Turbans. The city is unstable, and strangers are everywhere. So when a monk suddenly appears saying he wants to enlist, to them he probably looks like a spy. Zhu Chongba cannot explain his way out of it. The soldiers tie him up and prepare to execute him. The blade is already at his neck. Then, at that exact moment, someone rides by. It is Guo Zixing, one of the Red Turban leaders in Haozhou. Guo Zixing sees the commotion and asks what is going on. The soldiers answer that they have caught a suspicious spy. Guo stops, studies Zhu Chongba for a while, and in the end decides to keep him. As for what exactly he sees in him, the sources do not tell us in detail. He just says one thing: release him. That is the first time Zhu Chongba nearly dies. If Guo Zixing had not passed by that day, or had not taken one extra look, history might have unfolded very differently. There is ability in that moment, yes, but there is luck too. Make that timing a little later, and the result might change completely. Zhu Yuanzhang stays in Guo Zixing's camp. And wait a second, why am I calling him Zhu Yuanzhang now? A moment ago, he was still Zhu Chongba. So how did his name suddenly become Zhu Yuanzhang? Because after joining the army, he takes a new name. Yuan refers to the Yuan dynasty. Zhang is a ritual tablet, and in Chinese, Zhu is a homophone of Zhu, the verb meaning to kill or destroy. So in Chinese, the name Zhu Yuanzhang already carries the sense of destroy the Yuan, even wipe out the Yuan dynasty. Ordinary names are usually hopes handed down by elders. This one sounds less like a name and more like a political declaration. Keep climbing, keep fighting forward, and one day bring down the Yuan. Once he is in camp, people start noticing him quickly. He is brave, he fights hard, and he knows how to deal with other people. The histories say he often charged at the front in battle. When the army seized goods, he usually turned them in. When he received rewards, he often shared them. That quickly earns him a reputation, brave in battle and generous with the men around him. But a harder test arrives soon after. The rebel camp is full of internal tension from the start. At one point, another warlord kidnaps Guo Zixing, beats him, and plans to kill him. The moment Zhu Yuanzhang hears about it, he gathers men and rushes to the rescue. He saves Guo Zixing's life. And before long, Guo pays that debt back. From that point on, Guo clearly values him more. Soon after, Guo makes another decision. He gives his adopted daughter, Lady Ma, in marriage to Zhu Yuanzhang. The marriage is Guo's way of repaying the favor. Lady Ma would later become Empress Ma. And later on, she will be more than just an empress. She will be one of the very few people around Zhu Yuanzhang who can still hold him back. To understand why Lady Ma matters so much later, you first have to know what kind of woman she was. The history of Ming records that Lady Ma came from Suzhou. Her father was Ma Gong. Her mother died early. Ma Gong was an old friend of Guo Zixing, so he entrusted his daughter to Guo, who raised her like his own child. Why exactly Ma Gong entrusts his daughter to Guo is not recorded in detail. Some later accounts suggest he may already have died or may no longer have been able to raise her, but that remains speculation, not solid evidence. Guo teaches her to read and write. She is clever, can write poetry and paint, understands history, and has a strong character. She is said to be composed in appearance and generous in manner. At 20, Guo marries her to Zhu Yuanzhang. The marriage brings some happiness, but it does not last long, and life for Zhu Yuanzhang does not suddenly become easier. Because Guo Zixing is a volatile man, and he is easily swayed by rumor. People start speaking badly of Zhu Yuanzhang in front of him. Guo begins to suspect him. One day, under a pretext, Guo explodes in anger, has Zhu Yuanzhang locked in an empty room, and gives him no food and no chance to leave. That is one of the risks of placing your future under the wrong master in an age of chaos. You can work yourself to the bone, and he may still believe slander. You can save his life, and he may still turn around and lock you up. Men like Guo Zixing will use you, and they will guard against you at the same time. Zhu Yuanzhang sits there with nothing to eat. But his wife, Lady Ma, does not give up on him. Every day she secretly cooks flatbreads in the kitchen. When nobody is looking, she hides them against her chest and carries them to him. The bread has just come off the fire. It is burning hot. She presses it against her body and brings it anyway. The skin on her chest is badly burned, but she still does not let go. One day she runs into Guo Zixing's wife, Lady Zhang, on the way. Lady Zhang senses something is wrong and pulls her into a room to look. Her chest is already scorched. Lady Zhang is stunned. She immediately has food sent to Zhu Yuanzhang and urges Guo Zixing to release him. Later generations would remember this with a 4-character Chinese idiom, Huai Bing Ju Fu. Literally, it means hiding flatbreads against the body to save one's husband. The history of Ming gives it in one short line. She followed the future emperor in the army. Once she carried hot cakes hidden in her clothing to bring him food, and the flesh on her body was burned. Even from that brief line in the history of Ming, you can already see that Lady Ma endured hardship beside Zhu Yuanzhang for a very long time. Whether in the army or in the harshest moments of his life, she is never just standing on the sidelines. That companionship stays in Zhu Yuanzhang's memory for the rest of his life. After becoming emperor, when he looks back on those years in camp, he says this: "She followed me in the army and suffered every hardship with me. She is the one who suffered beside him all the way." After he is released, Zhu Yuanzhang understands something more clearly than ever. Guo Zixing is not reliable. He cannot stake his whole future on him, so he begins planning to lead troops of his own. He returns to his home region and recruits a force of 24 men. These are his earliest followers, and many future Ming founding heroes will come out of this first group. Shu Da, Tang He, Zhou Dexing, and others all emerge from these earliest ranks. With those 24 men, Zhu Yuanzhang begins fighting north and south, and from there the force grows. From 24 men to hundreds, from hundreds to thousands, from thousands to tens of thousands. He captures Jiqing, today's Nanjing in eastern China, and uses it as the base from which he begins competing for the empire. But competing for the whole empire is never that simple. By the end of the Yuan dynasty, multiple powers are rising almost at the same time. Zhu Yuanzhang is only one of them, and he is not the strongest one. Earlier, when we talked about Zhu Chongba's background, we already touched on how rotten the late Yuan situation is. People at the bottom are oppressed, the bureaucracy is falling apart, then famine and plague hit on top of that. Ordinary people have even less room to survive. That is why forces everywhere rise up at once. Everyone wants a share of the world that is breaking apart. So by this stage, what stands in front of Zhu Yuanzhang is not one enemy. It is a whole table of men trying to carve up the empire among themselves, and among them, the one who threatens Zhu the most and the one moving most aggressively is Chen Yuliang, a warlord said to command 600,000 troops and warships as tall as three-story buildings. But even if Zhu can withstand Chen Yuliang, that still does not mean he has won. Because at this point, no one is going to take all of China just by beating one rival. China at the time looks like a giant chessboard, and there are several major players on it, Chen Yuliang with the biggest army and the most urgency, Zhang Xicheng holding the richest region in Jiangnan, Fang Guozhen enriched by maritime trade, Ming Yuzhen sitting behind Sichuan's natural defenses, Zhu Yuanzhang himself, and of course, what remains of the Yuan. Each has territory, each has troops, each has his own calculations. What these men hold is not just a lonely city. They control whole regions that can raise grain, levy taxes, and support armies over time. Some of those territories are large enough to function on a scale close to a medium-sized, even major European state. At that moment, no one can easily say who will end up with the empire. So let's put these rivals on the table one by one. Once you see who they are, you understand what Zhu Yuanzhang is really up against. Rival 1, Chen Yuliang, the biggest army, the biggest ships, and the biggest appetite. Chen Yuliang controls territory across what is now Hubei, Jiangxi, and southern Anhui in central China. He founds his own regime, calls it Han, and declares himself emperor. His territory stretches across the middle reaches of the Yangtze, making him one of the largest regional powers of the time. According to the histories, he claims to have 600,000 troops. Whether that number is exact or not, at least one thing is certain. His military strength is terrifying to his contemporaries, and his fleet is even more intimidating. Chen Yuliang's warships are said to be as tall as three-story buildings. Horses could even run across their decks. These are Luchuan, tower ships, massive river warships built to overwhelm an enemy in battle. A rival like that naturally becomes one of the men Zhu Yuanzhang fears most. But Chen has a fatal weakness. His style is ruthless all the way through. He kills his superior and rises in his place. He kills his allies and makes himself the leader. Judging by the way he acts, he seems to live by one principle: whoever blocks the road dies. A man who rises by killing and swallowing everyone around him can be very dangerous in battle. But he is also the kind of man followers may obey without ever feeling safe beside him. And this is exactly the man Zhu Yuanzhang is eventually going to have to fight to the death. Rival 2, Zhang Xicheng, holding the richest land but not eager to expand. Zhang Xicheng is another major rival. His territory lies mostly in what is now Jiangsu and Zhejiang in southeastern China. This region has long been one of the richest parts of the country. People often call it Jiangnan, the fertile region south of the Yangtze. He controls the heart of Jiangnan's wealth. Among all these regional powers, he is the one least likely to run short of money. His lands include one of the most developed economic zones in China at the time. Silk, tea, porcelain, much of it comes out of this region. Financially, he stands in the strongest position of the bunch, but Zhang Xicheng has a fatal weakness too. He is too cautious. He is nothing like Chen Yuliang, whose ambition is written all over his face. He comes off more like a wealthy merchant. He wants to hold his land, collect his taxes, and live well. As for conquering all of China, he never seems to be in that much of a hurry. But that becomes the problem. In an age of chaos, if you do not move against others, sooner or later they move against you. If Zhang keeps staying on the defensive, the initiative slips away bit by bit. And once that happens, even all his money may not be enough to pull the situation back. Money is an advantage, but in a civil war, money has to become troops, grain, and momentum. Zhang Xicheng has the money. What he lacks is the will to turn that advantage into conquest. Rival 3, Fang Guozhen, the coastal fence-sitter. Fang Guozhen is a very different kind of rival. His territory lies mainly along the southeastern coast of what is now Zhejiang, near Taizhou and Wenzhou. His domain is not huge, but it sits right on major sea trade routes along the southeast coast. That gives him one special advantage: control over maritime trade. His fleet is strong enough that almost nobody wants to challenge him at sea. And his way of operating is simple. He leans toward the strong, he steps on the weak. At different times, he surrenders to the Yuan. At different times, he cooperates with Zhu Yuanzhang. Then, he submits again. Then, rebels again. Over and over, you can see what he really wants. Not the empire, just the preservation of his maritime power and his position as a regional lord. He does not care all that much who becomes emperor. Men like that are usually not the most desperate fighters, but they are very good at choosing sides. Rival 4, Ming Yuzhen, the king of Sichuan, living comfortably behind natural defenses. Ming Yuzhen is another unusual rival. He controls what is now Sichuan and Chongqing in southwestern China. He founds a regime called Xia and declares himself emperor. His lands sit behind the natural defenses of Sichuan and Chongqing, turning the region into a self-contained power base. For any separatist warlord, Sichuan is already a good place to hold. Mountains on all sides, dangerous roads, hard to attack, easy to defend. Chinese tradition has long had a saying: the roads into Shu are harder than climbing to heaven. So in theory, Ming Yuzhen can stay there for a very long time, but he has one defining feature. He does not really want to come out. Sichuan is hard to enter. It is hard to leave, too. Ming Yuzhen can sit behind the defenses, play emperor in his own corner, and live fairly well. He has no real appetite for seizing the Central Plains. He is not eager to fight Zhu Yuanzhang head-on either. A rival like that is the kind you can leave alone for a while. If you do not provoke him, he probably does not come looking for you. If you lay the main rivals side by side, the picture becomes clearer. Chen Yuliang controls Hubei, Jiangxi, and southern Anhui. He claims 600,000 troops. His great advantage is scale, huge armies, huge ships, and aggressive momentum. His clearest weakness is that ruthless methods make loyalty harder to secure. Zhang Shicheng holds Jiangsu and Zhejiang, the richest territory on the board. He commands several 100,000 men. Wealth is his great advantage, but he thinks defensively and does not have the strongest drive to expand. Fang Guozhen controls the Zhejiang coast with tens of thousands of men and strong sea power, but he is more interested in protecting himself than in taking the empire. Far to the west, Ming Yuzhen sits in Sichuan and Chongqing. The terrain there is extremely hard to attack. That is his strength. But he is also far away, and that limits how much influence he can exert on the main eastern theater. And Zhu Yuanzhang? He controls the Nanjing region in Jiangsu with around 200,000 troops. He does not have the biggest army. What he has is steadier long-term positioning and an unusual ability to turn small advantages into decisive gains. If you just look at the numbers, Zhu Yuanzhang is not the obvious favorite. His territory is not the largest. His starting position is not the strongest. His army is not the smallest. But it is far smaller than Chen Yuliang's. His fleet is weaker too, mostly small boats and fishing craft. So the question becomes even sharper. What exactly allows him to win in the end? Zhu Yuanzhang has a strategy that becomes famous later. Build high walls, store up grain, be slow to claim the crown. In Chinese, those three phrases are expressed as Gao Zhu Qiang, Guangji Liang, Huan Cheng Wang. Those 9 characters boil down to 3 things. Build high walls means strengthen defenses and secure your base first. Store up grain means gather supplies so the war can be sustained. Be slow to claim the crown means do not rush to place yourself at the center of everyone's hostility too early. And that matters because the late Yuan is not a simple duel between 2 men. It is a struggle among multiple powers trying to destroy one another at once. The man who raises the biggest banner first is often the man who gets surrounded first. Han Liner uses the title of the Little Ming King. The higher that banner rises, the easier he is to target. After Chen Yuliang proclaims himself Emperor of Han, He too becomes a more obvious threat that everyone has to watch. Zhu Yuanzhang does the opposite. Nominally, he respects Han Liner. Politically, he borrows the banner. Militarily, he digs in and buys time. The strategy itself comes from Zhu Sheng. A lot of rulers are given good advice by subordinates and never really follow it. Zhu Yuanzhang listens, and more importantly, he actually acts on it. Other men in a civil war tend to charge ahead in one burst. Zhu Yuanzhang fights more like a man determined not to run out of breath. So how does he turn that strategy into reality? Step 1. Truly secure the base. After taking Jiqing, he does not immediately strike out in every direction. He stabilizes the city first, restores production, gathers refugees back in, and resettles whoever can still farm. Step 2. Avoid fighting on two fronts at the same time. To his north is the main Red Turban force under Han Liner and Liu Futong. To his west is Chen Yuliang. To his east is Zhang Shicheng. What he fears most at this stage is not losing one battle. It is being squeezed by multiple sides at once, so he stabilizes the north first and focuses his attention on the rival most likely to come down the Yangtze and strike directly at his vital base. Step 3. Deal with the major rivals one at a time. But then a harder question appears. Which one do you hit first? If you think of the situation as a chessboard, Zhu is facing more than one enemy. He is facing several. Fang Guozhen is good at self-preservation. Ming Yuzhen is far off in Sichuan. Zhang Shicheng is rich, but fundamentally defensive. The immediate threat is still Chen Yuliang, and the reason is simple. He is not just strong, he is urgent. He controls the upper Yangtze. He has a big army. He has large warships, and among all the rivals, his desire to expand is the clearest. If he pushes downstream, Zhu Yuanzhang's base is going to take the blow head-on. So Zhang Shicheng can wait, Chen Yuliang cannot. And from the way Zhu later deploys his forces, it is obvious that he understands this. But before he can finish placing his pieces on the board, Chen moves first. In the 4th month of 1363, Chen Yuliang launches a huge assault on Hongdu, today's Nanchang, in Jiangxi. That attack drives Zhu Yuanzhang straight into the corner. At that point, the question is no longer, which rival should I fight first? The question is much more direct. Do you take this battle, or do you not? Zhu Yuanzhang has no way to retreat. If he backs down, he dies. So he takes it. Now comes the decisive battle. Chen Yuliang moves. The histories describe the army in overwhelming terms. 600,000 men bearing down on Hongdu. Warships cover the river. Masts crowd together in dense layers. On those massive 3-story ships, soldiers stand packed together while horses run across the decks. Now look at Zhu Yuanzhang's side. Most of his craft are small boats, even fishing boats. By common estimates, his strength is only around a third of Chen's. Emergency messages from Hongdu keep arriving, one after another. Each one is saying the same thing. Reinforcements, reinforcements, reinforcements. Zhu Yuanzhang sits in his command tent and stares at the map. From his perspective, there is no retreat here. Other people might surrender. He cannot. Judging by what he knows about Chen Yuliang, surrender means death. Losing means death. Only victory leaves any road open afterward. On paper, this is an extremely difficult battle, but not an impossible one. In the 7th month of 1363, the two forces collide at Poyang Lake, China's largest freshwater lake. This becomes one of the most famous battles in pre-modern Chinese history, and it is often regarded as a naval battle of extraordinary scale. There are sails everywhere, so many that from a distance the open surface of the water almost disappears. From this moment on, everything converges at once. Hongdu's desperate calls for help, the pressure from Chen Yuliang, and all the preparation Zhu Yuanzhang has done before this. It is all going to be decided on this lake. The battle lasts a full 37 days, and for most of those days, the fighting is savage. So first, let's look at how it unfolds. In the 7th month of 1363, the two sides meet at Poyang Lake. At the start of the battle, Zhu Yuanzhang's general Xu Da attacks first. Xu Da leads from the front, beats back Chen Yuliang's vanguard, and captures more than 1,000 men. Xu Da is one of the generals Zhu Yuanzhang relies on most, and later he is often regarded as the top founding military hero of the Ming. He comes from a poor peasant background and is from the same home region as Zhu. He has followed Zhu from the earliest days, fighting campaign after campaign and piling up victories. What people remember about him is not just his bravery, but how rarely the historical record shows him taking credit for himself. When there is loot, he keeps none of it. When there is credit, he shares it with subordinates. When Zhu Yuanzhang asks why, Xu Da says that all of it was earned by men risking their lives, while he was only the one leading them. Later, Zhu will trust him enough to make him Grand General, the commander of the empire's armies. Now let's turn back to Poyang Lake. Xu Da drives off Chen's vanguard, yes, but Chen Yuliang's main fleet is still there. Those giant tower ships stand on the water like moving fortresses. Chen's ships are simply too tall. Zhu's smaller craft have a terrible time boarding them. Soldiers grab ropes and try to climb up, only to be shot down before they can reach the deck. Corpses start floating on the water. The lake turns red with blood, and the battle drifts into stalemate. The two sides face off on the lake for several days. Both take losses. Then some of Zhu Yuanzhang's own generals begin to waver. Inside the command circle, voices start arguing for retreat. Zhu Yuanzhang rejects it. From his point of view, if he retreats, he may lose both Hongdu and his own base. If he keeps fighting, there is still a chance to turn the whole thing around. So the battle goes on. At the most critical point in the campaign, Zhu Yuanzhang and his generals reach for a tactic that Chinese naval warfare has seen before: fire. But it only works if the conditions line up. You need two things for a fire attack. First, the enemy has to be packed together and unable to scatter. Second, the wind has to blow toward them. Chen Yuliang helps provide the first condition. His giant ships are tall and stable, but that also makes them slow and clumsy. To hold formation and stop Zhu's small boats from slipping through, he orders the ships to be chained together with iron links, much as Cao Cao is said to have done at Red Cliffs. The advantage of chaining ships together is obvious. The fleet becomes one stable mass, almost like fighting on dry ground. It also becomes harder for Zhu's smaller boats to break through and split the line. But once fire starts, the exact same strength turns into a weakness. If one ship catches, the others are trapped beside it. That gives Zhu the first key condition for fire attack. The targets are concentrated and cannot disperse. Then, whether by luck or fate, the second condition appears too. After several days of fighting, the wind shifts. It has been blowing from the northeast. Now it suddenly turns to the northwest. That means fire ships can be sent straight downwind into Chen Yuliang's fleet. So now the second condition is there as well. With the wind behind them, the flames can drive directly into the enemy formation. The two key conditions for a fire attack are suddenly both in place. Zhu Yuanzhang seizes the moment. He gives the order. He prepares dozens of small craft loaded with gunpowder, dry grass, and oil. The soldiers light them and send them surging forward on the northwest wind toward Chen's fleet. The fire ships fly like arrows. Smoke rolls behind them. Then they slam into Chen Yuliang's formation. Flames erupt at once, and because Chen's giant ships are linked together by iron chains, there is no time to pull them apart. One ship catches, then another. Then the wind carries the blaze across the whole formation until the fleet itself becomes a sea of fire. Soldiers begin throwing themselves into the lake just to survive. At that moment, the lake is almost a vision of hell on earth. The fire spreads through wind and chain together. Flames paint the sky red. Smoke crushes visibility. All across the water there are burning ships, fleeing men, and floating bodies. The fire attack is a tactical success, yes, but the cost is enormous. What burns on the lake is not just enemy ships. It is also countless ordinary soldiers dragged into a struggle for the empire. That is the price of civil war. Chen Yuliang stands on his flagship, watches his fleet burn, and tries to break out. He sticks his head out to direct the fighting, and at that exact moment, an arrow flies toward him. It enters through the eye and passes through his skull. The history of Ming records it very briefly. Chen leaned out from the boat to direct the battle and was struck by a stray arrow that pierced his eye and skull. Chen Yuliang dies on the spot, and with that, his Han army collapses completely. The Battle of Poyang Lake lasts a full 37 days. When it is over, the lake is still covered with corpses and the remains of burned ships. As for how many die, the exact number has long been debated. But one thing is certain: Chen's forces suffer a catastrophic defeat, with enormous numbers killed, captured, or forced to surrender. Zhu's side pays a terrible price too. This is Zhu Yuanzhang winning from weakness against strength. With fewer troops, he holds and beats the larger force. It almost feels like a fleet of small boats surviving and defeating floating fortresses. And the price of that victory is the death or injury of tens of thousands. This is one of the most important turning points of his life. Win here, and the path to unifying the empire opens much wider. Lose here, and everything ends in ruin. And from this point on, the balance of the war starts leaning in his favor. So why does he actually win at Poyang Lake? The answer is not that he suddenly produces some miracle move out of nowhere. Several things he has built up beforehand all start working together at once. His side does not lose order first, his generals do not retreat first, and the fire attack lands precisely on Chen Yuliang's biggest weakness. Start with the most obvious layer. Chen has taller ships, bigger ships, and more men. But once those giant vessels are chained together, they become slow to turn and slow to adapt. The moment the wind changes and fire ships hit them, that advantage flips into a vulnerability. So what makes the fire attack deadly is not just the size of the flames, it is that the tactic strikes directly at the weakest point in Chen's whole naval system. Then there is the human side. Generals like Xu Da and Chang Yuchun can stay at the front, lead by example, and actually carry out Zhu Yuanzhang's orders under pressure. In a battle like this, the worst thing is not that people die at the front. It is that the front line loses cohesion and the whole formation collapses behind it. At least in this battle, Zhu's side never breaks first. There is one more factor people often overlook. This battle lasts 37 days. That is not just a dramatic number. It means more than a month in which any day might be the day your army cracks. If Zhu Yuanzhang retreats halfway through, all the preparation before this becomes worthless. But he holds on through sheer stubborn will. And if you look back the other way, Chen Yuliang's problem is not just a tactical error. He rises through fear and brutality. That can produce obedience for a while. But when the situation starts turning, armies held together by fear are more likely to waver, scatter, or switch sides. Fear can buy submission. It rarely buys the kind of loyalty that makes men die for you at the decisive moment. After Poyang Lake, Chen Yuliang is dead. But that does not mean the empire automatically falls into Zhu Yuanzhang's hands. The real change is not that the war is over. The real change is that for the first time, Zhu Yuanzhang now stands in the strongest position to outlast everyone else. The next question is whether he can turn that victory into actual unification. After winning at Poyang Lake, the road in front of Zhu Yuanzhang opens up dramatically. But a road opening up is not the same as the hard part being over. Winning one decisive battle and actually taking the whole empire are never the same thing. Chen Yuliang is dead, but his son Chen Li is still holding Wuchang, and the Han regime does not evaporate overnight. Zhu Yuanzhang does not let victory go to his head. He knows that at moments like this, the greatest danger is not that the enemy still exists. It is that you relax too soon. History is full of rulers who win a great battle, indulge themselves afterward, and end in disaster. So Zhu keeps pressing, attack, attack again, and keep attacking. In 1364, Zhu Yuanzhang besieges Wuchang, and Chen Li eventually surrenders. Only then is Chen Yuliang's whole power block truly broken apart. And next comes Zhang Xicheng, not always the fiercest enemy, but certainly one of the hardest to uproot. Because he has money, he has cities, and he has enough grain and enough time to endure. In an age like this, simply being able to endure is a form of power. Zhang Xicheng's main base is Pingjiang, today's Suzhou. It is one of the richest cities in Jiangnan, with high walls, deep moats, and abundant supplies. You do not take a place like that in one rush. You have to besiege it. You have to cut off its grain. You have to grind it down step by step, until it can no longer breathe. And that is exactly what Zhu Yuanzhang does. He sends Xu Da, Chang Yuchun, and others to keep eating away at Jiang Shicheng's outer strongholds until Pingjiang is sealed off. This is not a beautiful lightning campaign. It is a punishing war of attrition. One day, you cut a supply line. The next day, you pull out another outer fortress. The day after that, you tighten the encirclement one step further. Jiang Shicheng's greatest strength is wealth. Zhu Yuanzhang's most frightening quality is the patience to wear down your money, your grain, and your morale until nothing is left. In 1367, after nearly a year of siege, Pingjiang falls and Jiang Shicheng is captured. That old rival is finally out. Then comes the last significant southern opponent, Fang Guozhen. Fang is shrewd, maybe the shrewdest of them all. He knows how to read the wind. He comes up through maritime power and is especially good at reading shifts in the political weather. Once Chen Yuliang is destroyed and Jiang Shicheng is clearly collapsing, Fang Guozhen can already see where the game is going. So he surrenders. As for Ming Yuzhan's line in Sichuan, it sits in strong terrain, but it is simply too far away to determine the outcome of the main eastern theater. And that is what you start seeing in the years after Poyang Lake. Zhu Yuanzhang is no longer just pulling off a comeback. He is doing something harder. He is taking the advantage he has fought so hard to create and making it real, step by step. In the first lunar month of 1368, Zhu Yuanzhang is enthroned in Yingtian, today's Nanjing. He proclaims a new dynasty, the Ming, and adopts the reign title Hongwu. Notice something important here. The Yuan court in the north has not yet fully given up the Central Plains, but by now, Zhu Yuanzhang no longer sees himself as just another warlord. He is announcing something much bigger. From this day forward, the empire is going to be reclaimed in the name of a new dynasty. After becoming emperor, he immediately orders Xu Da and Chang Yuchun to launch the northern expedition. The army surges north with unstoppable momentum. That same year, it captures Dadu, today's Beijing. The Yuan emperor flees north, and Yuan rule over the Central Plains is effectively finished. But taking the capital does not mean everything automatically becomes stable. The south has only just been pacified. The north has only just been taken. Local populations have to be soothed. Armies have to garrison territory. The old order has to be dismantled. The new one has to be built. So the impressive thing about the northern expedition is not just that it wins. It is that Zhu Yuanzhang does not merely seize land the Yuan once held. He pulls those lands into the order of the Ming. Many rebels can win battles. Very few can actually take an empire in hand and make it work. Zhu Yuanzhang can. And that is one of the biggest differences between him and all the other strongmen chaos produces. In 1368, the year Zhu Yuanzhang becomes emperor, he is 40 years old. Only 15 years have passed since he first joined the army. Only 24 years have passed since the years when he wandered and begged for food. On an auspicious day in the first lunar month, he walks up the steps one by one. Behind him, the civil and military officials kneel, and waiting in front of him is the dragon throne. The histories do not tell us exactly what flashes through his mind in the instant he sits down. But if you place the first half of his life beside that moment, it is hard to imagine he does not think of poverty, death, and wandering. When he rises before the court, what he holds in his hand is no longer a broken bowl. It is an empire, from beggar to emperor in only 24 years. Among the founding emperors of Chinese history, there are not many who climb all the way to the throne from a social starting point this low. Liu Bang had once been a local Qin Han official. Zhao Kuangyin was already a military commander when he rose, but Zhu Yuanzhang had been a monk and a beggar. Compared with most founding emperors, his starting point is far lower. If you stop and think about it, he has known hardship on a level most of us never will. For a dynasty that has just crawled out of civil war, what matters most? Not ceremony, not celebration. What matters is sorting the country out again from the ground up. How much land is there? Where are the people? Who is farming? Who is paying tax? Who is serving as a soldier? All of that has to be checked again from scratch. because if the court cannot even answer those questions, the state is going to slide back into disorder, and in the end, it is ordinary people who will pay for it. After taking the throne, Zhu Yuanzhang pays especially close attention to the foundations of the state: land, households, grain. And he really does spend enormous effort on household registration, land measurement, and tax and labor registers, trying to get the state back into clear order. Once that order reaches the local level, it becomes very labor-intensive. County offices have to register people one by one and measure land plot by plot. How many people are in each household? Who has come of age? Who owes grain tax? Who owes labor service? Nothing can stay vague anymore. Land is treated the same way. Where exactly does it begin? Where exactly does it end? How much land does it contain in mu, the traditional unit used to measure farmland? All of it is drawn and archived in what are called fish-scale registers, plot by plot, tightly packed together like scales on a fish. And this may sound crude, but do not underestimate it. In an age of chaos, these are the first things to break down. People flee, land goes barren, records fall apart, and then the local powerful families start hiding land and shifting taxes. In the end, someone always pushes the burden onto poorer people below. So Zhu Yuanzhang has to do this in minute detail. On the surface, it looks like bookkeeping. In reality, he is reclaiming the people and the land that have drifted away in wartime, inch by inch, back into state control. The military works on the same logic. Zhu does not want to keep rounding up men temporarily every time war breaks out. So he promotes the Weisuo system, a permanent network of hereditary military garrisons stationed in fixed locations. Part of the population is organized into military households. These families are expected to serve generation after generation. In peacetime, they farm. In wartime, they provide soldiers. At the start of the Ming, the system works quite well. The court can hold on to manpower more easily, and the military budget is easier to sustain. But systems like this usually carry one built-in problem. A founding emperor may be able to keep them under control. Later, emperors often cannot. And Zhu Yuanzhang is precisely the sort of ruler who keeps an exceptionally tight grip. From tax grain to military affairs, he wants to watch a huge amount of it himself. That makes the early Ming court very tightly wound. It also plants a risk. Too much of the machine depends on him personally. While he is there, everything seems held down. But once the throne passes to someone less diligent and less hard-edged, the whole structure becomes harder to sustain. And that same grip shows up not only in administration, but also in the way he remembers people and events. Zhu Yuanzhang never really forgets the people who help him when he is at his lowest. Do you remember Liu Jizu? He was the neighbor who once gave Zhu Yuanzhang a patch of land to bury his parents. That same Liu Jizu is one of them. In 1378, after Liu Jizu has already died, Zhu posthumously grants him the title of Marquis of Yihui. That is not a routine thank you. In the old Chinese system of noble rank, a marquisate sits just below a duke. It is a major honor. Liu's wife receives an imperial honorific. His son is assigned to guard the imperial mausoleum and handle ritual duties there. His grandson is sent to the Imperial Academy, one of the highest educational institutions of the time. That one patch of wasteland, that one act of kindness, ends up turning into glory for several generations. Zhu Yuanzhang is not the kind of man who forgets his early years. If someone once reached down and pulled him up, he remembers it. If someone cheated, grabbed, or shifted burdens onto the heads of poor people in times of chaos, he remembers that too. He never forgets his hometown, either. In the second year after taking the throne, he orders the construction of a central capital at Fengyang, built to the standards of an imperial capital. Of course, there are practical calculations behind that decision, but there is also deep personal feeling. Fengyang is where his rise begins. His parents are buried there. The worst years of his life are there. For a time, the boy who walked out of Fengyang and later climbed onto the dragon throne genuinely wants to raise his home region into the center of the empire. So this is not some casual country residence. Walls, palaces, altars, offices, all of it is laid out on the scale of a real capital. The manpower and material cost are immense. But later, Zhu Yuanzhang stops the project. In the 8th year of Hongwu, he orders work on the central capital halted, and the reason is brutally practical. It is too expensive, too demanding, too destructive to the people's labor. For the people below, that does not just mean the state spends less money, it means the corvée laborers, craftsmen, timber, stone, grain, and transport tied up in the project can finally be pulled back. Fewer months of forced labor, less farmland left untended. For many families, that already makes a huge difference. This really brings out the contradiction in Zhu Yuanzhang. He really does remember his homeland. He really does want to reward it in some dramatic way. But the moment he sees the price growing too heavy, he is also capable of yanking the whole impulse back. It is hard to say which side is the real Zhu Yuanzhang, the one who wants to elevate his hometown into the heart of the empire, or the one who sees that the people cannot bear the burden and shuts the project down. Most likely, both. And something else shows the same contradiction even more clearly. The imperial mausoleum stele, he later writes. Normally, when an emperor raises a stele for his own family mausoleum, you would expect solemn grandeur, heaven's mandate, founding glory. But Zhu Yuanzhang does not write only that. He writes about the poverty of his family, how his parents died, how he wandered. That makes all the difference. It does not read like a polished facade for posterity. It reads more like a man refusing to let the hardest years of his life be erased. As if even after reaching the dragon throne, he still has to look back from time to time and ask himself, where did I crawl out of? How did people starve? How hard was it even to find a place to bury the dead? And that is part of why he later strikes corrupt officials so hard. His hatred of corruption is extreme, and so is the force of his response. He creates a notoriously harsh anti-corruption system. Under Zhu Yuanzhang's legal code, an official who embezzles as little as 60 taels of silver can lose his head. 60 taels does not sound like a gigantic sum. In modern terms, it is roughly several thousand to maybe 10,000 US dollars. Not the kind of number that sounds instantly unbelievable. More like the point at which an official has only just started reaching out a hand. But for Zhu Yuanzhang, the line is drawn right there. He does not wait until the corruption becomes some monumental scandal. If you reach, if the accounts prove it, your life may be over. And one of the most infamous punishments is even harsher, flaying the condemned and stuffing the skin with straw. The skin of an executed corrupt official is displayed inside government offices for later officials to see. He does not just want your life. He wants your fate placed directly in front of everybody else's eyes so that anyone entering a local county office knows from the first moment not to put out a hand. It sounds almost fictional. But there are indeed historical references to this kind of punishment in early Ming sources. The logic behind it is easy to see. Zhu believes corruption can only be crushed by punishments severe enough and frightening enough to force it down. But he does not rely only on terror against officials. If you look at the design of the Great Proclamations, you can also see that he wants to send a signal to common people. If local authorities become layers of extortion and protection, there should still be a way to push a case all the way up. During the Hongwu reign, Zhu personally compiles the Great Proclamations, issues them repeatedly across the empire, and orders both officials and commoners to study them. On the surface, the text looks like law, but for many ordinary people at the time, it also looks like something more practical, a possible way out when local abuse leaves them with nowhere else to go. The third collection of the Great Proclamations records one very specific case. In Changshu County, a commoner named Chen Shuliu is abused by a local functionary named Gu Ying. Local officials protect one another, and he has no way to get justice. Then, the Great Proclamations appear. Chen Shuliu, along with his younger brother and nephew, seizes the abusive clerk, carries the text in his hand, and takes the case all the way to the capital. Zhu Yuanzhang not only receives them and punishes Gu Ying along with the officials who protected him, he also rewards Chen with money and clothing and exempts his household from certain corvée obligations for 3 years. He further orders that anyone who retaliates against the family is to be punished heavily without pardon. And that is what makes the case so striking. Chen Shuliu is not a great official. He's not a local strongman with reach at court. He's just an ordinary man pushed to the wall by a corrupt petty functionary. Under normal circumstances, someone like that would struggle to get a full sentence out inside a local county office, let alone drag a county clerk in chains to the capital. But this time, he is carrying the emperor's own text, and by doing that, he is also betting on something, whether the emperor's threats are real. And he wins that bet. Once that story spreads, local officials are going to fear it, and ordinary people are going to remember it too. The Great Proclamations are not just some text the emperor wrote for the lower classes to admire. They are something he genuinely intends people to use. The crucial point is not that anyone can simply seize an official. The crucial point is that the emperor is publicly telling local society this: if corruption has already become a whole ladder of mutual protection, then stop swallowing the abuse in silence. You can jump over those rotten local offices and bring the men harming the people straight to the capital. And by local functionaries, we mean the clerks and runners in those local offices who control documents, grain, and money, and are often the ones most directly able to bully common people. For people who have spent their lives unable to move a case against officials, fear is not the first feeling this creates. It is something else. It is the sense that if local power has truly pushed you to the wall, there is at least one man in the empire who is still willing to stand up for you. Seen from the other side, Zhu Yuanzhang's suspicion is no longer aimed only at a handful of corrupt men. He is beginning to suspect the entire local bureaucratic system of failing together. If the Great Proclamations are Zhu Yuanzhang telling the people, if the local world becomes rotten enough, you still have a path to bring injustice straight to me, then the Jinyue are the other side of that same logic. They are not a blade handed to the people. They are a blade the emperor pulls back into his own hand. Picture a household in the capital. Before dawn, the husband has to leave for court. His wife probably does not dare ask much. She straightens his clothes and watches him go. What she fears is not supper going cold. It is whether he is coming back that night. The later historian Zhao Yi, quoting the Cao Muzi in Notes on the 22 Histories, writes about the atmosphere in the capital in the late Hongwu years. He says that officials going into court each morning would part from their wives and children as if saying goodbye for the last time, and if they returned safely that evening, the family would celebrate as if they had lived one more day. That is not a statute, but it captures the air of the time. The emperor now has a blade very close to his own body, and when it moves fast. No one can be certain whose head it will swing toward next, and that blade is the Jinyue, the embroidered uniform guard. At first, the institution is called the Yiluan office. In the 15th year of Hongwu, it is renamed the Jinyue. In peacetime, they stand near the emperor as an imperial guard and ceremonial presence. But when it comes to making arrests and handling cases, they are the institution closest to the emperor, and often the quickest to act. So quick, in fact, that Zhu Yuanzhang himself later begins to think they are getting out of control. By the 20th year of Hongwu, he is already dissatisfied with how brutally they are handling cases. He orders instruments of torture burned, detainees transferred to the Xingbu, the Ministry of Punishments, for review, and even abolishes the Jinyue prison. Later, he specifically reiterates that the Jinyue may no longer torture people privately. Anyone they seize is to be handed over to the regular judicial organs for trial. That in itself tells you a lot. He forged the blade himself, but after forging it, even he can see that it is too fast enough to start cutting people indiscriminately. And the reason the Jinyue later leave such a heavy mark on history is that they play a crucial role in the 4 great Hongwu cases. At that point, the blade is no longer falling only on corrupt officials. It begins turning, step by step, toward Zhu Yuanzhang's own people. Zhu Yuanzhang does not become emperor by himself. He has a whole circle of highly capable men around him. Xu Da can fight, Chang Yuchun can charge, Li Shanchang handles logistics, Liu Bowen provides strategy, Hu Weiyang controls the center of government, Lan Yu becomes a fierce general of the next generation. But after taking the throne, Zhu starts killing these men. One founding hero after another falls. Historians later group four of the biggest political purges together under the label, the Four Great Hongwu Cases. And to understand them, you really have to take them one by one. Let's turn the clock back and start with the earliest of them. Case 1. The Blank Forms Case, 1376, a bloodbath over accounting documents. At first glance, this case almost sounds absurd. In Imperial China, local officials have to report their fiscal accounts to the capital each year. But if the numbers do not match once they get there, they may have to travel all the way back home just to seal the documents again. And China is huge. Transport in the 14th century is slow. A round trip can take months, so officials begin carrying blank forms that have already been stamped with official seals. Once they reach the capital, they fill in the correct numbers there. Over time, this becomes an unspoken bureaucratic habit. When Zhu Yuanzhang discovers it, however, his reaction is furious. From his point of view, this is not just administrative convenience, it is taking blank sealed documents and using them to alter accounts after the fact. If you can do that, then how much was really submitted and how much ends up written on paper may no longer be the same thing at all. Zhu's logic is blunt. If this is no longer about saving time, but about deceiving the emperor, then it should be treated as a capital offense, so he classifies it as deceiving the throne. The result is that several hundred officials are executed. The reason this case remains controversial later is that it sits right on the line between administrative convenience and falsifying imperial accounts. Some say Zhu Yuanzhang is too harsh. The officials are doing this because transport is difficult, not because they are embezzling. Others say Zhu is right. Fraud in fiscal records is fraud, regardless of the excuse. But one thing is beyond doubt. Zhu Yuanzhang's demands on officials are extraordinarily strict. At least in the blank forms case, he shows that he has a far lower tolerance for deceit than for incompetence, because he has been a beggar. And he has seen too much of what happens when officials skim, hide, and lie while burdens are passed downward. So toward the bureaucratic machine, he never stops carrying deep suspicion. And from the perspective of ordinary people, what matters most here is not just the phrase deceiving the emperor. Grain taxes, labor service, and the whole accounting system all land on common people in the end. If local officials can walk around with pre-sealed blank documents and fill in whatever numbers they want, then nobody can be sure how much of the grain the people hand over is what the record will later say they handed over. So inside Zhu Yuanzhang's rage, there is both the fury of an emperor being deceived and the visceral disgust of a man who rose from the bottom and knows exactly how the people below pay for the lies of the people above. Case 2. The Hu Weiyang Case, 1380. The death of the chancellor and a tighter grip on the throne. Hu Weiyang is the chancellor, the highest-ranking civilian official under the emperor. He is also one of the men Zhu Yuanzhang relies on most. But in 1380, Zhu accuses him of treason. Hu is executed, and the investigation runs for years. According to the history of Ming, more than 15,000 people are implicated and put to death, with some estimates running as high as 30,000. And among them are some of the most powerful men in the whole court. Whether Hu Weiyang truly plots rebellion is still heavily debated. Some say he does. They argue that he builds factions, grabs power, and tries to hollow out the emperor's authority. Others say the charge is a pretext, that Zhu Yuanzhang has long wanted to abolish the office of chancellor and simply needs a reason. And the deepest reason that interpretation carries weight is straightforward. The chancellor's power is enormous. In imperial China, the chancellor stands at the head of the civil bureaucracy. Many memorials pass through the chancellor's office first, before they reach the emperor. That arrangement can reduce the emperor's burden. But if the chancellor's power grows too large, he can filter information, build patronage networks, and even begin to overshadow the throne itself. That possibility is exactly what Zhu Yuanzhang fears most. After the Hu Weiyang case, he makes one of the most consequential decisions of his reign. He abolishes the office of chancellor, a post that has existed in one form or another for more than 1,000 years. After that, the emperor deals directly with the six ministries, the six core administrative departments of the central government. No single grand minister now stands between the emperor and the entire bureaucracy. This change shapes the political structure of the Ming for generations. From then on, the traditional chancellorship never returns. Imperial power is pushed even more directly to the front, but the problems arrive with the solution. More and more memorials now have to be read and handled by the emperor in person. The whole system becomes more and more dependent on the emperor himself. With a ruler like Zhu Yuanzhang, the machine can still be forced to turn. But once later, emperors prove less diligent. Power does not vanish into empty space. It gets absorbed elsewhere. Sometimes by palace eunuchs, the castrated men serving inside the inner court. Some historians see a link between the abolition of the chancellorship and the later rise of eunuch influence. Others caution that eunuch domination has more than one cause and cannot be traced back to this one institutional change alone. Case 3. The Guo Huan Case, 1385, another vast purge in the name of fighting corruption. Among the four great cases, this is the anti-corruption case that shocks the court the most. Guo Huan is a vice minister in the Hubu, the Ministry of Revenue. In other words, he works inside the office that handles grain, taxes, and state finance. In other words, he is sitting right in the core of Zhu Yuanzhang's fiscal system. In the third month of the 18th year of Hongwu, 1385, censors Yu Min and Ding Tingju step forward with accusations. They claim that officials in the Beiping provincial administration, Li Yu and Zhao Quande, are colluding with Guo Huan to embezzle government grain. Zhu Yuanzhang immediately orders a full investigation. And what the investigation uncovers is a corruption network with astonishing reach. Guo Huan is not stealing alone. He is part of a corruption network that stretches from the capital to the provinces, from the central ministries down to local offices. Their methods of corruption fall into three broad categories. First, direct diversion of local tax revenue. Taxes from places like Taiping Prefecture and Zhenjiang Prefecture are simply swallowed privately. Second, interception of autumn grain shipments. Western Zhejiang is supposed to remit 4.5 million shy of autumn grain, with shu being the standard grain measure used in tax records. In reality, only a little over 2 million shi are actually delivered. Most of the rest is siphoned off layer by layer. Third, invented fees. When taxes are collected, officials add an absurd number of extra charges: transport fees, food fees, warehouse fees, God and Buddha fees, and more. The names alone make it obvious what is happening. Transport fees supposedly cover shipping costs. Food fees supposedly cover the meals of the men escorting the grain. Warehouse fees supposedly cover storage management. God and Buddha fees supposedly cover sacrifices to pray for the grain's safe arrival. The list is dizzying. According to the case record, the total amount embezzled is roughly 24 million shi of grain. Measured against the scale of annual tax grain at the time, that comes close to a full year's revenue. Once you put it that way, you can understand Zhu Yuanzhang's fury. If even the core fiscal machinery of the empire is rotten at that level, the shock to him is hard to overstate. So Zhu orders the investigation widened and pushed all the way down. An official named Wu Yang from the Shengxingxi, the Office for Reviewing Criminal Cases, takes charge of the interrogations. The case spreads into 12 provincial administrations, from the capital to the provinces, from the 6 ministries to prefectures and counties. The number of implicated officials becomes so large that even the 6 ministries at the center are dragged in. Large numbers of officials at and below the level of left and right vice ministers are executed. The purge tears through the fiscal structure of the early Ming. From the center to the localities, officials fall in great numbers. The number of provincial and local officials implicated and killed reaches into the tens of thousands. The scale is so large it shocks the whole country. And once the state starts trying to recover stolen grain, the investigation turns into nationwide turmoil. Wealthy private households are driven into bankruptcy. The history of Ming puts it starkly. As the search for embezzled assets spread across the empire, Even middling households among the people were ruined. At that point, this is no longer just an anti-corruption case. Once the court starts chasing down embezzled assets everywhere, many families get swept in. Maybe your household lent grain once. Maybe someone guaranteed an account in your name. Maybe a document somewhere mentions you in passing. That alone can bring disaster to your door. A house sealed, property confiscated, savings built over decades gone overnight. That is what makes the Guo Huan case especially frightening. It is not just that it destroys a class of corrupt officials. It is that once the investigation gathers momentum, it spreads outward like floodwater and drags in people who are not even part of the court. Eventually, the case grows too large and sparks intense resentment among officials and local elites. Judging by what happens next, Zhu Yuanzhang also realizes the storm has to be brought to a close. On the 27th day of the 6th month of 1385, he issues the Edict on Corruption Crimes in the 6 ministries and declares the case closed. The symbolic sign of closure is striking. He executes Wu Yang, the very official who had overseen the interrogations. What Zhu means is clear. I ordered you to eliminate corruption, and you turned it into fresh abuse of the people. Anyone who does this in the future will not be spared, even under amnesty. Wu Yang is then put to death, and the Guo Huan case is brought to an end. From the result, it looks both like accountability and like an attempt to stop the damage and calm public fear. The case leaves behind another legacy that still reaches into modern life. After the Guo Huan case, Zhu Yuanzhang realizes that corrupt officials can manipulate accounts simply by altering ordinary numerals. In ordinary Chinese numerals, you can turn 1 into 10. You can turn 3 into 5. With just a few extra strokes, the whole record changes. So he does something whose effects last to this day. He replaces the ordinary written numerals used in accounting with much more complex formal ones, the kind of financial numerals Chinese documents still use today. The reason is simple. Those formal numerals are much harder to alter. It becomes far more difficult for officials to tamper with figures after the fact. Case 4. The Lan Yu Case, 1393, the final great purge of the military elite. Lan Yu is one of Zhu Yuanzhang's most powerful generals. He defeats Mongol forces and is widely regarded in the early Ming as a major war hero. He is also Chang Yuchun's brother-in-law and a comrade of Shu Da. But over time, he grows increasingly arrogant and overbearing. He seizes private farmland, drives out government officials, and keeps thousands of household servants and adopted retainers. He even dares to answer Zhu Yuanzhang back to his face. His arrogance shows up in very concrete ways. At one point, after a victorious northern campaign against the Mongols, he returns late at night to a city whose gates are shut. The commander on duty does not open them quickly enough, so Lan Yu actually orders the gates forced. He attacks a city of the very state he is supposed to be defending. Zhu Yuanzhang learns of it and only rebukes him verbally. He does not punish him, because Lan Yu is a meritorious general, and more importantly, he is still very useful. That usefulness is one major reason Zhu tolerates him for so long. In the early Ming, the Mongols are still active in the north and can still strike south. Zhu Yuanzhang needs a hard-hitting field commander like Lan Yu. But when Crown Prince Zhu Biao dies, Zhu changes his mind. Zhu Biao is the son Zhu values most and the designated heir to the throne. He is known for being capable and comparatively humane. He also has a decent relationship with Lan Yu. At least from Zhu Yuanzhang's point of view, as long as Zhu Biao is alive, a fierce veteran like Lan Yu can still be kept in line. But in 1392, Zhu Biao dies. From this point on, Zhu Yuanzhang's worry about Lan Yu clearly deepens. One common interpretation is that he fears that after his own death, a young emperor will not be able to control a battle-hardened senior commander like Lan Yu. So in 1393, he strikes. Lan Yu is accused of treason, he is executed, and the scope of implication rapidly expands to family members, subordinates, and old allies tied to the founding military elite. 25,000 people die in the purge. 25,000. Taken together, The four great Hongwu cases amount to four huge political purges. So how many people die altogether? Later summaries often reduce them to one chilling figure, close to 100,000 executions. Many founding heroes and senior commanders are swallowed up in the process. By this point, very few of the original generation who helped Zhu win the empire are still left. The motives behind the purges cannot really be reduced to one sentence, but one thing is certain: they completely reshaped the political structure of the Ming. And from the perspective of ordinary people, what the four great Hongwu cases leave behind is not just the impression that the emperor kills a lot. They also drive home a much harsher lesson across the empire. This emperor does not merely denounce corruption. When he moves to kill. And when he kills in waves. Officials fear him, generals fear him, local elites fear him, and ordinary people have no reason not to fear him too. Looking at the fate of some of the founding heroes makes it even clearer what kind of ruler Zhu Yuanzhang was. The harsh way Zhu Yuanzhang dealt with his founding heroes left a deep impression on later generations. So much so that people often come away with the sense that the men who helped him build the empire were rarely allowed a peaceful ending. Shu Da, the greatest founding general, and the name you cannot avoid. Shu Da is the general Zhu Yuanzhang trusts most. He is not some commander who defects halfway through the struggle. He is one of the core men who fight alongside Zhu from the early rise all the way to the founding of the dynasty. After becoming emperor, Zhu appoints him grand general and places the empire's armies under him. Now, turn the clock back to 1368. If you want to know how important Shu Da is, just look at his record. In the same year Zhu Yuanzhang is enthroned at Yingtian, Shu Da captures Dadu, today's Beijing, then the Yuan capital, and tears away Yuan rule over the Central Plains. Later he campaigns north against the Mongols and holds down pressure from the frontier for years. At least in the early Ming, he is unquestionably one of the most formidable military commanders alive, and yet the image he leaves in the histories is rarely one of arrogance. When there is victory, the spoils go to the troops. When there are rewards, he shares them out immediately. How much does Zhu trust him? Enough to marry one of his own daughters into Shu Da's family. According to the history of Ming, Shu Da dies of illness in 1385 at the age of 54. Zhu Yuanzhang personally arranges a grand funeral and posthumously honors him as Prince of Zhongshan, about as high a posthumous distinction as one can receive. But a story spreads widely in later generations that Shu Da's death is not natural. In the popular tale, Shu Da develops a severe back ulcer. Doctors supposedly tell him he must not eat steamed goose. Zhu Yuanzhang hears about it and deliberately sends him a steamed goose. Shu Da eats it and soon dies. The story becomes extremely famous, but mainstream historians generally do not accept it. The standard view is that the tale is unreliable, and the reason is basically twofold. The history of Ming clearly states that Shu Da dies of illness and that Zhu Yuanzhang grants him an elaborate funeral. And medically speaking, the old idea that a back ulcer makes steamed goose fatal does not really hold up either. Why then does the rumor spread so far? Largely because Zhu Yuanzhang's reputation for purging founding heroes looms so large that later generations naturally start to wonder, would he really have spared even a man like Shu Da? If Shu Da stands for the great military hero, Li Shanchang stands for the earliest senior civilian who helps Zhu Yuanzhang keep the whole enterprise running. He follows Zhu from the early uprising, handling grain, logistics, administration, and later helping build institutions and settle the bureaucracy. After the Ming is founded, he rises to the very height of office and is enfeoffed as Duke of Han. He is also Zhu Yuanzhang's fellow townsman, a man with long-standing and extensive networks. By ordinary logic, a man like that, old, retired, and already stepped back, ought to be among those most likely to end in peace. But in the 23rd year of Hongwu, the aftershocks of the Hu Weiyang case continue rolling outward and eventually reach Li Shanchang too. According to the history of Ming, Hu Weiyang had courted him earlier. When the old case is reopened, testimony, letters, and old connections are all pulled back out. Li is accused of knowing and not reporting, and is treated as part of Hu's faction. What makes this especially chilling is that Li Shanchang is already 77. He is not a frontline general. He is not a man still standing in court every day arguing face-to-face with the emperor. He is old. He is retired. His sharp political edge ought to be behind him. But in Zhu Yuanzhang's later logic, danger is never judged only by what a man is doing right now. It is also judged by what old prestige he still carries, what old relationships still surround him, and whether some web of influence might come alive again if trouble begins. So, Li Shanchang does not escape. He is executed, and his family is heavily implicated as well. A man who rises with Zhu from Haozhou and climbs to the top of the state still ends beneath the blade at 77. There's a very famous line in Chinese popular memory. Where Zhuge Liang once helped divide the world in three, Liu Bowen helped unite it. Liu Bowen, whose personal name is Liu Ji, is one of Zhu Yuanzhang's most important strategists. Popular legend turns him into an almost supernatural figure who can summon wind, call rain, and foresee the future. The real historical Liu is less magical and no less impressive. He is a jinshi, a scholar who has passed the highest civil examination. He is widely read and deeply knowledgeable in military affairs, astronomy, and calendrical science. Zhu Yuanzhang brings him out to serve as a strategist. He helps him shape strategy, read situations, and even assess weather. But to understand Liu Bowen's real importance, you have to go back to the years before the Ming is founded. He makes concrete, practical contributions. The first major one is the strategic choice to defeat Chen Yuliang before Zhang Shicheng. If you pull the timeline back to around 1360, Zhu Yuanzhang is facing a brutal problem. To his west stands Chen Yuliang. To his east stands Zhang Shicheng. Both are dangerous, but he cannot fight them the same way. If he picks wrong, the other one may strike from behind. If both pressures arrive together, the whole situation becomes extremely dangerous. Liu Bowen's judgment is famous. Zhang Shicheng is a self-protecting bandit and not the main worry. Chen Yuliang has coerced his way upward, holds the upper reaches against us, and should be dealt with first. Once the Chen forces are destroyed, Zhang will stand isolated and can be settled in one blow. The logic is clear. Zhang Shicheng is fundamentally defensive. If Zhu attacks Chen, Zhang is unlikely to seize the moment and strike from behind. Chen Yuliang, by contrast, controls the upper Yangtze and can attack downstream at any moment. That makes him the true immediate threat. So the answer is, deal with Chen first, and later events validate the judgment. Zhang Shicheng does not rescue Chen at the crucial moment. Liu Bowen sees the difference in political temperament between the two men. Chen is more aggressive and more urgent. Zhang is more conservative and self-protective. That strategic clarity helps Zhu Yuanzhang put the whole order of his campaigns in place. The second major contribution is institutional. After the Ming is founded, Liu Bowen helps with the design of the state's political order. Together with men like Li Shanchang, he takes part in discussions around the Great Ming Code, court ritual, and the rebuilding of examination institutions. A rebel army becoming a dynasty needs more than battlefield victories. It needs a workable order, and Liu Bowen is one of the people helping design it. But none of that guarantees him a good ending. Zhu Yuanzhang's attitude toward Liu Bowen is always mixed. Trust, yes, but also unease. Because Liu Bowen is too intelligent, advisors who see too deeply and have too much independent judgment are often the very people emperors both rely on and guard against. Later, Chancellor Hu Weiyang and Liu Bowen fall out. Hu speaks against Liu before Zhu Yuanzhang. Zhu gradually distances himself from him, and yet Liu Bowen is already dead by 1375, before the blank forms case has even happened. Later generations debate his death too. Some suspect Hu Weiyang has a hand in it. Others think he simply dies worn down by frustration and anxiety. Whatever the truth, the end is still tragic. A strategist celebrated for brilliance does not find a peaceful conclusion either. You can see the contradiction in him here. Zhu Yuanzhang can be brutal. He can be merciless with his own officials and generals. But there is another side to him as well. He is also one of the most diligent emperors in Chinese history. According to the veritable records of Ming, he regularly rises before dawn and keeps reading memorials late into the night. Morning court was not originally meant to be daily, but he makes it so frequent that officials have to be present before 3 in the morning. And the strain does not fall on the emperor alone. If he gets up that early, the whole court has to rotate around that schedule. Officials waiting for audience, clerks pushing documents, messengers hurrying dispatches. The tighter the emperor pulls the rope, the tighter the entire bureaucracy has to stay wound. So the tension of the Hongwu reign does not live only beside the dragon throne. It travels all the way down through the layers of administration. Yes, things move quickly, but people are also constantly pressed by that intensity. This is not an occasional burst of hard work. It is practically every day, regardless of weather. Later estimates based on documentary materials suggest that over his lifetime he handles more than 160,000 memorials. On average, that means dealing with more than 200 pieces of state business a day. If you break those numbers down, the grind becomes obvious. Officials enter the palace in darkness before dawn and wait in the cold for court. When the audience ends, the work is not over. It is only the start of the next pile of memorials: finance, border defense, criminal cases, disaster reports, one after another, without end. Many days the court audience is only the beginning. The real exhaustion comes from the mountain of state business afterward. He eats with memorials beside him and continues reviewing them through the meal, almost never truly setting the work aside. He says so himself. "I attend to a myriad affairs each day. How could I dare slack off?" He is frugal too. He lives in old palace structures inherited from the previous era. He's not obsessed with rebuilding palaces on a lavish scale. He wears clothing over and over, patched and washed repeatedly. At one point, seeing an official in new clothes, he reportedly remarks, "I wear old clothes every day, and yet you people are wearing new ones." The officials are so frightened that they hurry home to change. And yet one thing is genuinely hard to deny. He does do a great deal that helps ordinary people survive. That has a lot to do with where he comes from. He has been a beggar. He knows what the people at the bottom fear most. After becoming emperor, the things he pays closest attention to are very practical. Do not press taxes too hard, put wasteland back under cultivation, repair waterworks, because when famine comes, it is the common people at the bottom who collapse first. He reduces and clears out many of the harsh and miscellaneous taxes and labor burdens left over from the late Yuan. Farmers who open new land are exempt from taxes for the first 3 years. Migrants resettled to reclaim wasteland receive tax exemption on newly cultivated land for 5 years. And resettling migrants to reclaim wasteland is not an empty phrase. It means taking people and placing them back onto deserted land so they can farm again. War has driven many peasants away. Fields have gone barren. So Zhu Yuanzhang moves farmers from densely populated regions, gives them seed, oxen, and tools, and suspends taxes on the new fields for 5 years. For many people scattered by war, that is not abstract policy. Only a few years earlier they are still on the road as refugees or beggars. Now they can finally receive a piece of land, some seed, some tools, and begin settling a family again. First, they have to get crops into the ground. Then they can slowly build a house. Only then can life gradually recover. That is why those first years of tax exemption matter so much. If you have just settled your family, if the seed has not yet paid back and the roof is not yet stable and taxes hit immediately, the land may go barren all over again. The result is enormous. During the Hongwu reign, the amount of newly reclaimed land increases by more than 4 million qing, a large traditional unit of farmland. For the time, that is an extraordinary scale of reclamation. Grain output rises sharply as well, and early Ming grain reserves stand out even by longer historical standards. He also orders an enormous amount of hydraulic construction. During the Hongwu years, more than 40,000 waterworks projects are built across the empire. And in an agrarian world, these things are lifelines. Water control may not sound as dramatic as a battlefield victory, but for the people of the time, it can matter even more. If one canal works, one stretch of farmland survives another year. If one embankment holds, an entire village's grain supply is saved. Zhu Yuanzhang has starved before. He has seen how a bad year can push people right to the edge. So when he looks at these projects later, he is not just counting canals and dikes in an account book. He is thinking about whether fewer people are going to starve. There is another category of things he watches closely too. Institutions like charitable relief homes exist to shelter the aged, the weak, the orphaned, the widowed, and the poor with no one to rely on, so that local government cannot simply ignore them. In the spring of the 12th year of Hongwu, the capital is hit by continuous rain and snow for more than 10 days. Zhu Yuanzhang remembers how, in his own poor youth, weather like that meant not even having proper clothing to stay warm. So he orders monthly grain allowances for the elderly, the young, the poor, and the isolated, and has fuel supplied by the state as well. That is not just the abstract phrase, benefiting the people. It is something very concrete. In this freezing weather, the old and the poor in the capital need to survive the season. On another occasion, an older relief home is too small to house everyone. So Zhu orders a new site at Longjiang and has 260 rooms built specifically to house these people. That actually goes one step beyond handing out porridge. Porridge keeps you alive today, but tomorrow you may still sleep under the wind. Once those rooms are built, the question changes. The state is no longer only helping you avoid death tonight, it is giving you somewhere to stay. On paper, 260 rooms are just a number. For the people who need them, they are doors, walls, roofs. They are the difference between sleeping under eaves and sleeping indoors. For people with no one to depend on, the question is not dignity in some abstract sense. It is whether there is somewhere to sleep tonight, and whether there is any chance of being alive tomorrow. Zhu Yuanzhang has nearly starved himself. He has seen that in an age of chaos, the first people swallowed are always the ones with the least protection. So when he focuses on these things, he is often focusing quite directly on whether the poorest can survive. You can see the contradiction in him here. On one side, heavy punishments, purges, terror. On the other, real work in relief, cultivation, and resettlement. At this point, there is one question you cannot really avoid. Why does he become harsher and harsher as time goes on? On the surface, the answer sounds simple. To secure imperial power, to clear obstacles for his descendants. But that alone is not enough. Zhu Yuanzhang's starting point is too low and his suffering too great. When his parents die, nobody steps in to hold him up. When he wanders for 3 years, almost nobody in the world seems to care whether he lives or dies. Then, after he joins the uprising, he personally witnesses betrayal, power struggles, warlords devouring one another, and allies turning against each other. So if you look back at his whole experience and his later actions, his basic judgment of the world really is different from that of many people born in power. He is much quicker to imagine loss of control, oversized power blocks, faction building, and betrayal than to assume that everyone will follow the rules. That does not mean every person he kills is truly plotting rebellion. But by the logic of his later purges, danger is not something to wait for until it fully happens. If someone might become dangerous, he is already inclined to strike first. That is why his political style grows colder in old age. A man who spends his youth living inside fear does not necessarily relax once he reaches the top. By old age, that state of mind often grows heavier, not lighter, because fewer and fewer people around him can still hold him back, and fewer people remain who can guarantee that succession will be stable after he is gone. Later, we will come to the deaths of Empress Ma and Crown Prince Zhu Biao. Taken together, those losses seem to crush what little softness he still has left. And inside that frame of mind, the later purges only become heavier. If there is one person around Zhu Yuanzhang who can still make him pause when he is about to strike too hard, it is probably Empress Ma. At least in the way the histories remember her, she is one of the very few people in his life who can genuinely pull him back. Many empresses in Chinese history are described as virtuous, but Empress Ma is a little different. She does not only endure hardship beside him, she is someone who can truly step in when Zhu Yuanzhang is about to do something severe. The history of Ming is quite clear on this point. When Zhu becomes furious in the front palace, Empress Ma often waits until he returns and then talks him down gradually. One old Ming official, Guo Jingxiang, has a son falsely accused of plotting patricide. Zhu Yuanzhang is ready to execute him. Empress Ma argues that Guo Jingxiang has only this one son and that the matter may not even be true. If he is killed rashly, an entire family line may be cut off. Later investigation shows the accusation is false. Li Wenzhong, Zhu Yuanzhang's nephew and a major early Ming general, also nearly gets removed from border command because of slander. Again, Empress Ma intervenes. What this shows most clearly is this. She is not just sighing beside him after the anger has passed. She is willing to put out a hand while the blade is still coming down. The most famous example is the Song Lian case. Song Lian is a major Confucian scholar of the early Ming and an important teacher of Crown Prince Zhu Biao. Zhu Yuanzhang has long respected him. In the 13th year of Hongwu, Song Lian's grandson Song Shen is implicated in the Hu Wei Yang case, and Song Lian himself faces severe punishment. Empress Ma tells Zhu Yuanzhang, even ordinary families who hire tutors for their children know how to begin and end that relationship properly. So how can the Son of Heaven do less? And besides, Song Lian has long retired. He may not even know what his grandson has done. Zhu does not agree immediately. After that, Empress Ma stops touching meat and wine. When Zhu asks why, she replies, "I am making merit for teacher Song." Zhu rises from his seat after hearing that. The next day, Song Lian is not executed. Instead, he is exiled to Maozhou. There is another case that reveals her sense of judgment. Shen Xiu, the man later merged in popular memory with the legendary rich merchant Shen Wansan, is one of the wealthiest men in Jiangnan. The histories say he helps fund city walls and even proposes rewarding the army. Zhu Yuanzhang takes offense and wants to kill him. Empress Ma argues that the law exists to punish lawbreakers, not to punish inauspiciousness. If a private citizen is rich enough to rival a state, that is his own ominous fate. Why should the emperor personally kill him for it? In the end, Zhu spares Shen's life and only exiles him to Yunnan. From an ordinary person's point of view, the most precious thing about Empress Ma is not simply her kindness. It is that she understands what an imperial order really costs. When one edict falls, what is lost is not just face. It may be a life, a family, even the future of several generations. So when Zhu Yuanzhang is in a rage, the histories still preserve the image of one person who dares say, "Slow down." Empress Ma is one of them. In 1382, Empress Ma dies. Zhu Yuanzhang is deeply grieved and never appoints another empress. Once she is gone, he becomes lonelier, and there is one fewer person near him who can genuinely stop him. For everyone around the throne, that matters enormously, because it changes whether, once the blade is already raised, there is still anyone in the palace who can fight for one more breath of mercy on someone else's behalf. Of course, after Empress Ma's death, there are still ministers, relatives, and the crown prince around him. But when his anger rises, people who do not merely flatter him, do not merely kneel and beg, and can instead slowly talk him around, become much rarer. And for the aging Zhu Yuanzhang, the losses do not stop there. He loses not only Empress Ma. The heavier blow still lies ahead in the death of Crown Prince Zhu Biao. Zhu Biao is Zhu Yuanzhang's eldest legitimate son, the heir he chooses early, the prince he values most, and trains for years to inherit the throne. After the founding of the Ming, Zhu Yuanzhang consistently raises Zhu Biao as the future emperor. Great scholars like Song Lian are ordered to lecture the crown prince and the imperial princes in the Dabin Hall, the palace school for imperial heirs. In other words, Zhu is preparing Zhu Biao for the succession from the very beginning. And this is not just education inside palace walls. The history of Ming records an incident that makes this very clear. In 1367, when Zhu Biao is only 13, Zhu Yuanzhang sends him to the Linhao area to see the landscape, the fields, and the local elders, and to ask how the struggle had really been endured back when the army first crossed the river. Why does he do that? Because he is afraid this son, raised in privilege, will know books but not know how people actually live. How far is the road? How tiring is the ride? How hard is farming? How difficult is it to build a state from nothing? The crown prince needs to see those things with his own eyes. For a 13-year-old heir, that trip matters. In the palace, he is being taught how to be crown prince. Outside, he begins to understand the kind of people the empire actually rests on. What do fields look like? How do old men talk when they remember civil war? How does a family survive when one year's harvest fails? You cannot learn all of that from inside a palace. This is not ordinary royal education. It is a founding emperor forcing the next emperor to understand that the empire did not fall from the sky. It was clawed back from famine, death, and chaos. So what the prince must learn is not just how to write essays, it is how to bear a dynasty, who can be trusted, who must be watched, what cannot be allowed to collapse in the treasury or on the frontier. Zhu Biao has to learn all of it sooner or later. That is why so many people take comfort in him, not just because he is the eldest legitimate son, but because he is not some last-minute choice. For a long time, everyone in the court assumes that the next emperor will come smoothly along this line. In many eyes, Zhu Biao is humane, steady, and legitimate. As long as he lives, succession in the Ming has a clear direction. And for a dynasty not yet long established, that clarity alone stabilizes half the political world. Civil officials know whom the future points toward. The imperial princes know the crown prince's place is clearly set. As long as Zhu Biao is alive, many tensions that might otherwise erupt can still be held down. But in the 25th year of Hongwu, Zhu Biao suddenly dies of illness. And at that point, many contradictions that had been containable start changing shape. Zhu Yuanzhang is already in his 60s. An old man is now burying the son he has spent years preparing. And more importantly, the moment Zhu Biao dies, the succession question becomes acute. Zhu has many sons. Several of them are adults. Many already have standing and prestige of their own. By the logic of dynastic politics, he could have chosen another adult son as heir. But he does not. Instead, he chooses Zhu Biao's son, Zhu Yunwen. Zhu Yunwen is the young imperial grandson who will later reign as the Jianwen emperor. By passing over adult princes and choosing his grandson, Zhu Yuanzhang pushes Ming's succession away from a straightforward father-to-son transfer and into a grandfather-to-grandson one. On paper, the line still makes sense. It continues through Zhu Biao's branch, but everyone in court can see that formal legitimacy and real weight are not the same thing. The person who will sit on the throne is a young grandson. The men standing below him are adult uncles, older than he is, more experienced than he is, and some of them command troops. And the reason he chooses Zhu Yunwen is that Zhu Yunwen is Zhu Biao's son, and Zhu Biao is never just a son to Zhu Yuanzhang. He is the man who is supposed to take over the whole state one day. A great many arrangements in the empire rest on the assumption that Zhu Biao will continue managing things after Zhu is gone. The moment he dies, that foundation disappears. From then on, Zhu Yuanzhang no longer looks at the court only in terms of who is a problem today. He begins looking at it in terms of who may become a problem after his own death. And this is where things become especially dangerous. The next ruler is no longer an adult son hardened by experience. It is a young imperial grandson. Standing around the empire, meanwhile, are adult imperial princes, enfeoffed in the provinces, and in many cases commanding troops of their own. There are also powerful nobles and veteran commanders who rise out of the founding wars. As long as Zhu Yuanzhang is alive, all of these forces remain broadly controllable. Once the throne changes hands, any of them may become a problem. So in his later years, what Zhu Yuanzhang fears is not just one particular man. He fears that once he dies, the whole system may come apart at once. This state has been built by his own hands, piece by piece. How taxes are collected, how armies are moved, how officials are managed, how law is enforced. He personally watches an enormous amount of it. The advantage is obvious. Things move quickly. The disadvantage is obvious too. The system depends too much on the emperor himself. If the man on the dragon throne is no longer Zhu Yuanzhang, can the machine still run the same way? That is the great question. And the danger grows worse because the successor is not a seasoned adult prince. The burden is falling onto a very young ruler. Zhu Yuanzhang's problem is not stupidity. He is intelligent, gentle, and well-educated. The problem is the sheer weight of what he is being asked to inherit. Imperial power has already been pushed very high. Provincial princes and the old founding military elite still hold immense weight. For a young new emperor to step into that arrangement, anyone would feel uneasy. There is one more irony beneath it. To guard the frontiers and protect the capital, Zhu Yuanzhang has enfeoffed many of his sons as princes in the provinces. Especially in the north, several of these princes command troops. While he is alive, that arrangement looks like an imperial shield. Once he dies, it can also become the biggest variable of all. It is a bit like surrounding your house with armed relatives to keep out thieves. While you are alive, they all obey. Once you are gone, nobody can be sure whether those blades might turn inward. A great many of Zhu Yuanzhang's late decisions look, on the surface, like killing. At bottom, they are his attempt to clear the path in advance for the future ruler. Who might refuse obedience? Suppress him. Who commands too many troops? Suppress him. Who is too old, too prestigious, too capable of overshadowing a young emperor? Deal with him first. It is a logic so cold that it leaves almost no room at all, but inside his own mind, it makes complete sense. The problem is that after doing all of this, he still cannot fully prevent the one thing he fears most. Not long after his death, the Jianwen emperor starts reducing the powers of the provincial princes. Zhu Di raises troops in revolt. The civil war, later known as the Jingnan campaign, still breaks out. And that is the deepest contradiction of all. He lets a great deal of blood flow in the present to stop bloodshed in the future. And in the end, the blood flows anyway. At the end, let's turn back and look once more at this founding emperor who cannot be captured in one sentence. Zhu Yuanzhang dies in 1398. He lives to 70. He reigns for 30 years. What, exactly, does Zhu Yuanzhang leave behind? The dynasty he founds, the Ming, lasts 276 years and passes through 16 emperors. If you look only at historical legacy, he leaves behind at least three things that are impossible to ignore. First, the structure of power. He abolishes the chancellorship and pushes imperial power much more directly to the front. That political pattern, in which the emperor personally dominates administration, continues shaping Ming and Qing politics long afterward. Second, the high-pressure logic he applies to corruption and local breakdown. Whether it is flaying and stuffing the skin with straw or the great proclamations, both reveal the same impulse: impose order by the harshest means possible. But no matter how strict a system becomes, it still cannot rule the human heart completely. Third, he really does push forward one practical measure after another: famine relief, land reclamation, charity, care for the abandoned and the poor. Places like charitable relief homes are there to receive the widowed, the elderly, the orphaned, and the helpless. In that world, this is not decorative state benevolence. It is the kind of support that can keep people from simply being left to die. For people who have just crawled out of the chaos at the end of the Yuan, none of this is abstract policy. It is about whether they can farm, whether they can get through a bad harvest, whether they can survive at all. But if you really try to see him from the standpoint of ordinary people, what he leaves behind is never one-sided. You may be grateful that he forces the world back into order. You may also fear how deeply the hand of the state reaches into your life. He wants you alive, but he also wants you tightly controlled. For example, Common people are not supposed to move around freely. Without travel permits, going elsewhere is difficult or impossible. You may end up confined to one place for life, and that is exactly why Zhu Yuanzhang is hard to sum up simply as either a tyrant or an enlightened ruler. Looking back from the outcome, all those heavy-handed moves in his later years are really preparations for what comes after his death. He wants to force down every power that might one day press on a new emperor. And yet the result is that the very danger he most wants to prevent still arrives. After the Jianwen emperor takes the throne, he begins reducing the powers of the princely fiefs. Zhu Di rises in rebellion, and the Jingnan civil war still breaks out. And reducing the princes is not just a matter of sending a few stern edicts. It means taking military power and territorial authority out of the prince's hands, piece by piece. If you stand on the Jianwen side, it looks necessary. If you stand on the prince's side, it already looks existential. Old troops are going to be dismissed. Household staffs are going to be cut down. Things that once moved on one command now have to wait for approval from the capital. For some, it threatens ruin. Once politics reaches that point, it is hard not to break. So the throne still changes hands through blood. Killing people does not mean killing the structural contradictions with them. You can kill the men. You cannot kill every contradiction built into the system. You can kill meritorious officials. You can kill generals. But the risks inside the princely fief system and the after effects of over-concentrated imperial power are not things one blade can cut away. That is Zhu Yuanzhang's deepest contradiction. By force of personal will, he almost single-handedly stitches a shattered world back together. But the more he believes he can arrange everything in advance, the more history ends up refusing to cooperate. In the end, history proves that some problems cannot be solved just by killing a few people first. There is one more question worth asking. Why does Zhu Yuanzhang's system seem to work under Zhu Yuanzhang himself, but prove so hard for later emperors to copy? Because at its core, the whole system is shaped too much by Zhu Yuanzhang himself. He has known hunger, so grain matters to him in an unusually direct way. He has seen common people dying by the roadside, so reclamation, water control, and relief are never empty phrases to him. But on the other hand, he has also been despised, driven away, and forced to live for years inside fear and insecurity. So once he gains power, he cares intensely about order, obedience, and control. He wants to hold many things in his own hands. That leads straight to the problem. The whole machine assumes the man at the top is Zhu Yuanzhang. You have to be able to endure like he does, work like he does, remember things like he does, grip affairs with the same, almost frightening intensity. You have to be willing to read endless memorials every day, personally manage finance, the military, justice, and official appointments, while also pacifying the people, containing the princes, and holding down the old founding elite. In Zhu Yuanzhang's own hands, the system can still run. Once the ruler is someone else, it becomes much easier for the structure to warp. So what he really leaves behind is a method that can be highly effective in the short term, but depends far too heavily on the emperor as an individual in the long term. And that is one reason Ming history can look both so hard-edged and so fragile at the same time. At the very end, let's go back to the opening image of this story. That 16-year-old boy holding a broken bowl could hardly imagine that 24 years later, he would truly sit on the dragon throne. And he certainly cannot imagine that he will leave behind two reputations that almost contradict each other. He really does force a shattered world back into order, but he also forces that order down too tightly. That is probably closer to the real Zhu Yuanzhang, a man who climbs from the very bottom to the top of an empire, then pushes both order and its cost to the extreme. And as for how a man like that should be judged or understood, feel free to tell me in the comments.